IMF's new boss voices concern about rising African debt levels. South Africa inflation rate drops to almost 9-year low. And Ghana and Boeing signed provisional order for 3 787 Dreamliners at Dubai Air Show. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Business Incorporated. I'm Chimezi Obi. Of course, we get the show started now with the markets. And here in Africa, investors have continued to show interest in the Nigerian equities. At intraday, the market was the only gainer. The index was up 0.65%. The South African JSE index, however, was down 0.69%. Egypt's EGX 30 also came down 0.53%. In the meantime, the Nairobi Stock Index closed in the red on Tuesday. And markets in the Middle East were mixed at intraday. Dubai stock market extended gains as most of its real estate stocks rose. The index rose 0.11% as Daya Development gained 3.6% and Emma Properties added 0.2%. The Abu Dhabi index was also up 0.11%. In Saudi Arabia, however, the index went south, down marginally 0.04%. The Qatari index was down 0.06%. Industries Qatar dropped 0.8%, and Qatar National Bank was down 0.6%. European stocks traded lower in the morning after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to hike tariffs on Chinese goods if Beijing does not agree to a trade deal. Well, aside from U.S.-China trade row, UK election debate also caught the attention of European markets. Well, let's talk to Conrad. Hello, Conrad. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chimmy. Good to be back.
Good to have you back. Well, Britain has held its first debate ahead of the general election next month. It was a heated debate, but many watchers expressed that both party leaders came over very weak. Now, what are cool-headed financial people in Frankfurt saying about the debate, and what are the markets hoping for with regard to the UK election?
You know, even though, of course, lots of people were watching the debate, it was probably more for entertainment. This is what people I talked to told me. They said, in terms of predicting the outcome and the potential impact of the outcome on the economy, other factors are playing a more important role. And I have to tell you, the bias is more towards the Conservatives, which has not to do so much with the fact that everyone would love Boris Johnson. But, you know, Jeremy Corbyn has been talking about nationalising the railways, the postal service, and maybe also utilities in the United Kingdom. And nationalisation, that's not exactly something that your average investor likes to hear about. Even though, of course, some of those ideas might have some merits. The privatization, for example, of the railway service in the United Kingdom really was very negative for the quality of the services and the prices. But still, investors often take the view that this kind of Labour policy is something that they would not like to see, and that they are hoping for the Conservatives to win the election and to finally come to an end with Brexit. Of course, a lot of discussion is going on right now, what kind of assets to think about after the election and after Brexit will finally be settled on. Small and medium-sized companies might be interesting. That's according to the opinion of BlackRock, the financial investor, especially because, you know, the overall global growth remains sluggish. So larger companies in the UK also will find it difficult to cope even after Brexit. But small and medium-sized companies that are in their niche and that are specialized in a very, you know, particular service or product, they might benefit from the hopefully eventually uncertainty going away after Brexit.
And on the corporate world, Germany's Wirecard is making for negative headlines again. It failed to get parts of its earnings report testified by the auditor. And this is not the first time Wirecard is being accused of not handling its reporting well. What's the market reaction and investors' take on this?
Well, the shares in Wirecard have slumped quite significantly, nearly 8% in the first minutes of trading this morning. But I have to say, most, or at least a large part of those losses have been made up in the course of this trading day. Because Wirecard managed to explain that the problem with the audit of parts of its Asian business has to do with the fact that the auditors simply didn't manage to get the information because the documents were with the authorities in Singapore, who are currently investigating whether or not everything was okay with the reporting of Wirecard in its Singapore-based businesses. So there was an explanation for this. And I talked to a trader who said something else, and I think something interesting. He said the fact that the report today was in a German newspaper means that the impact was less hard than it had been previously. You mentioned that Wirecard is being criticized for the way it makes its books, it writes its books, it makes its auditings. This is not the first time, but previously it was the Financial Times who had come up with those allegations, and the impact of a large English-speaking or English-language media outlet on stock prices seems to be more intense than the ones of German-speaking or German-language media outlets, because the algorithms that operate trading with large investors tend to be more willing to follow a trend coming from the English media, especially large influential ones like the Financial Times. I thought this was a quite interesting hypothesis by this trader.
All right, let's look at the airline sector. That sector seemed to be going through some kind of turbulent times, with South African Airways risking liquidation, Italy's Alitalia finding it difficult to find a new investor, and Germany's Lufthansa being threatened by strikes again. From an investor's point of view, are any airlines any good?
Well, I have to say I was quite surprised to check the Lufthansa share price this year, and despite the renewed troubles with the unions, Lufthansa's shares are big gainers this year. They have among the German DAX shares gained among the strongest, and this means that obviously investors differentiate quite well between the different airlines, despite the problems that, of course, Lufthansa still has with its unions. The problems that other airlines have with their unions are much more existential. South African Airways, for example, is one of those airlines, also Ryanair here in Europe. Lufthansa seems to still be quite okay positioned in the heart of Europe, catering to airline users worldwide who use Lufthansa and its bases here in Frankfurt and the one in Munich as hubs to smaller destinations in Europe. That's a business model that's not threatened by the unions, and that's very different to other airlines. You mentioned Alitalia, for example. This company too is facing existential problems because of the old contracts that still have to be served for staff at Alitalia. Same with South African Airways. Lufthansa does not have such big a problem.
All right, Conrad, I have to leave you at this time. Enjoy the rest of the day.